Come to think of it, well, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's the 11th of May, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have the hantavirus is being pushed everywhere by mainstream media, especially by the World Health Organization. This, I think, is their biggest push since the COVID panic-demic. They're trying to panic people over this. We're going to take a look at that, but there's also some very good news in terms of people's skepticism. Yeah, they jumped the shark for so many of us, and now we have a pushback to show the truth about SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Really, the vaccines? Looks like it. Well, we're going to talk about the back and forth over the Iran peace plan. What is happening with this? It's pure WWE, and we have the people in Israel. As a matter of fact, the major newspaper in Israel is saying that if Bibi gets his way, it's going to completely destroy Israel. And it's interesting when you look at the arguments that they make, it's the exact same stuff that Trump is doing here. And of course, we'll take a look at the "you will own nothing" and your identity papers, please. These threats that have been circulating around there for the longest time. We'll look at how they're trying to put these into practice. But let's begin with the WWE wrestling. And of course, when you look at Donald Trump, somebody put this up, and I thought it was the best example of nonsense in terms of Trump and his peace plans, and we're going to fix the strait, or we're going to destroy their civilization, and all the rest of this nonsense. It really is like this.
Why is Michael just lying?
Yeah, that's Trump right there prancing around for show.
Slow down and stop. What is it? Mockery.
I wonder if Vince McMahon is still writing his narratives for him. Trump calls Iran's peace proposal response totally unacceptable. Well, what is unacceptable to him totally is peace. He doesn't want to see any peace. As a matter of fact, he says Iran is playing games with the United States. Who is it that's playing games? They have basically done what they said they're going to do. They did not start this war. Trump started this war, hadn't thought it through, and now they are saying what they're going to do in response. And it's having some huge consequences in terms of restructuring the geopolitics of the area. As I said before, he doesn't do geopolitics. He does ego politics. And yet there's some real restructuring in terms of nuclear umbrellas for the Gulf states, as well as these mutual defense pacts that are being signed. And that, as many people have said, is part of the outcome of what Trump and Israel have done. Trump and Bibi, I should say. And that is to demonstrate to people the only way they're going to be safe from being attacked by Israel or by the United States is to have some kind of a nuclear deterrent. So it has done exactly the opposite of what they say is the intended purpose. So he said, I've just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. He said he's destroyed all the leadership there. So who's he talking to? As I said last week, is this a seance? Is he channeling into the dead Ayatollah. With a fragile ceasefire still holding for now, the odds of a peace deal by the end of May have plummeted. And people who are looking at this are saying that's the point at which it really starts to hit the fan. Big time. He said, playing games with the U.S. and the rest of the world for 47 years. No, that's what we've been doing for 72 years. 73, sorry. Started in 1953. And it was the U.S. who initiated this. When you look at the long, long history that is never talked about by Trump or the warmongers in this country, they don't talk about the overthrow of the Iranian president who was elected and the installation of a king who was supported by a ruthless secret police and surveillance state trained by the CIA, Mossad. But then there's many other things like the Iran-Contra scandal. What was that about? Anybody want to go back and look that up again? I've talked about it in the past. Anyway, it says they're laughing at our new great again country. They'll be laughing no longer. Really? Well, does Vince McMahon, is he writing the script for this stuff? Because it sounds just like the kind of nonsense you would see on WWE. Iran's reply to the U.S. proposal includes ending wars on all fronts. That's why it's absolutely unacceptable, right? We cannot end these wars. Sources say both camps have told Reuters the latest peace efforts are aimed at a temporary memorandum of understanding to halt the war and allow traffic through the Strait of Hormuz while they discuss a fuller deal, which would have to address intractable disputes such as Iran's nuclear program. Well, I think Colonel McGregor, Douglas McGregor, retired, nailed it exactly. Here's what he says is really going on and what Trump's options are.
You're President Trump right now. You're trying to convince everybody on Wall Street, as well as everybody who's willing to listen to you anymore, that this is a mini war. No, this is not a big war. This is a small war. In other words, don't worry about it. We've got it under control. We'll manage it. There's nothing really that the Iranians can do anymore. This will end when we decide to end it. In the meantime, by all means, continue to trade your stocks and bonds. Don't be concerned about this. This is not a major event. Well, Dan, that's nonsense, as you and I both know. What Iran has proven is that they can be very effective and they don't really need a Navy per se or an Air Force. They've got the ability with terrestrial-based and space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to see persistently everything that happens in the Gulf region and around their country. And they can target instantaneously with data that comes from satellites right down to the weapon system. And that is deciding the outcome. And the place is too big to invade. You know, we don't have 1 million men standing around waiting to be shipped out to go somewhere and do anything. So the whole business is a fraud. And what he's trying to do is convince everybody it's not. None of this is going to work.
Yeah, none of it's going to work. The whole thing is like a fraud, just like this. Well, again, when we look at the constant state of war that obviously Trump wants, I mean, they're not even finished with this. And they're talking about how they're going to carve up Cuba. Then what's next? Greenland or Canada, whatever. I mean, this guy has been belligerent and pushing the boundaries of conflict with people who are not our enemies even for the longest time. You know, they want to say, well, this has been going on with Iran for 47 years. Well, Iran wasn't our enemy 73 years ago when we began all this stuff. And of course, Greenland and Canada are not our enemies. What has he been doing? And he's been putting tariffs against countries that we even have trade surpluses with in order to punish them and bring them in line and show them what a big man he is. It is a constant state of war that he wants. And of course, war is the lifeblood of the state, but it is the death knell of a society. And people are realizing that about Netanyahu. And of course, the question is, does Netanyahu want to end the war? Who gets to decide when the war ends?
Is the war with Iran over? And if it isn't, who will decide when it is?
I think it accomplished a great deal, but it's not over because there's still nuclear material, enriched uranium that has to be taken out of Iran. There's still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There are still proxies that Iran supports. There are ballistic missiles that they still want to produce. Now, we've degraded a lot of it, but all of that is still there, and there's work to be done.
How do you envision the highly enriched uranium will be removed from Iran?
You go in and you take it out.
With what?
Or the
Special
Americans
forces
do.
from Israel, special forces from the United States.
Well, I'm not going to talk about military means, but
Yeah, I don't want to talk about how I'm going to use the Americans.
to me, I want to go in there, and I think it can be done physically. That's
He's not
the
going to
problem.
go.
If you have an agreement,
His son's not going to go either.
take it out. Why not? That's the best way.
What if there isn't an agreement? Can it be taken out by force?
Well, you're going to ask me these questions. I'm going to dodge them because I'm not going to talk about our military possibilities, plans, or anything of the kind.
And I'm just trying to get at how long is it going to take to achieve that aim?
I'm not going to give a timetable to it, but I'm going to say that's a terrifically important mission.
Can't say what we're going to do, what our goals are, the timetable. Doesn't that sound familiar? Well, as a matter of fact, Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, has predicted the end of Israel. The article's title is Netanyahu will leave, but the state will die with him. And they summarized it like this. And you notice how so many of these things could be said of Donald Trump as well. Netanyahu didn't just destroy the state, he destroyed everything. Society is divided, the country is eroding, the army is weak, the judiciary is fearful, the media is superficial, and the Knesset is unbalanced. Could you say that about the U.S.? Is the country divided? Well, of course it is. Is it eroding financially? Yeah. Is the army weak? Well, they like to talk about how much stuff they can blow up, but maybe strategically, they're not doing so well, right? And if you can't defeat a smaller country like Iran, the entire world sees how weak you are when you beg for help. At the same time, you're boasting about your stupendous victory. And so they go on to say Netanyahu caused a unprecedented global hatred for Israel. Has Trump done that for America? Why, of course he has. You got Canadians who are booing American teams. Canadians. You don't think Trump has done exactly the same thing? They're both Zionists. They both look at this stuff as theft and war for property. There's no longer any sympathy for us, said Haaretz, about belligerent Netanyahu, right? The guy is unbelievably belligerent. And our people have become hated by the world. We got places where they're charging extra money if you're an American because they just don't want any of us around because of Trump. The same thing is happening to Israel because of Bibi Netanyahu. Netanyahu's exit from power means the fall of Israel, says Haaretz. Well, that may be true of Trump, too. He may take us down before he leaves. So as I said before, they wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons for everybody except, of course, Israel, who will not admit that they've got them, but cagely talk about how Jonathan Pollard played the clip for you last week, about how he boasted that they used nuclear weapons to blackmail the United States. You give us what we want, or we're going to start a nuclear war with Egypt, for example. Well, now you have that as a blowback. They say they want to stop nuclear proliferation with the Gulf states and Arab states. Exactly the opposite is happening. A new nuclear umbrella rises over the Gulf as confidence in the U.S. fades. This is an RT article. The Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact could give Riyadh a nuclear-backed deterrent as Iran, Israel, and the U.S. reshape Gulf security calculations. So there was a mutual defense agreement between the Saudis and Pakistanis last September that was signed in. One of the most significant pacts between the two nations in recent decades, its central provision states that aggression against one state will be automatically regarded as aggression against both, echoing the principles of classic collective security treaties, and formally establishing allied relationships between the two countries. And of course, you have both of them looking at possible attacks from Iran, as well as we could say Israel as well. The true value of this agreement, however, lies in the context in which it was concluded. And according to Pakistani sources, its potential Islamabad estimates an arsenal of 150 to 160 nuclear warheads in Pakistan, as well as a well-developed nuclear missile delivery system, including short and medium-range missiles. The agreement legally allows for the consideration of Pakistan's nuclear capabilities in defense of Saudi Arabia. effectively creating the first nuclear umbrella in the Islamic world, founded not on Western guarantees, but on mutual Muslim solidarity, reinforced by shared strategic interests. So you don't want to have a Muslim nuclear deterrent? Well, now you got it. Isn't it great? Like I said, they don't do geopolitics, they do ego politics. For Riyadh, the primary source of existential anxiety is Iran. The U.S. serves as a military counterbalance to Tehran. However, the Trump administration has clearly demonstrated the limits of its reliability. Trump is unable to subdue Tehran. Iran may emerge from this crisis significantly strengthened, acquiring the status of an undefeated regional power. As a matter of fact, this whole failed attempt that Rubio and others called Project Freedom, that was going to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, was shut down by Saudi Arabia, saying you're not going to use our airspace or the major air base that you put in Saudi Arabia. So they're moving further and further away from the United States. First, they moved away from the petrodollar. Now they're moving away from this, and they're moving towards Pakistan. Riyadh would face a formidable neighbor with a stronger than ever geopolitical standing, based on the failure of Trump in terms of dealing with Iran. This scenario compels Saudi Arabia to treat its partnership with Pakistan seriously. While Washington wages war, Riyadh seeks to ensure its own security. Netanyahu and Israel have consistently resorted to force and has been able to get away with it. The only nation that has confronted Israel is Iran, but the odds are stacked against Tehran. It now faces not just Israel, but a full-fledged U.S.-Israeli alliance. Saudi Arabia finds itself in a particularly precarious position, caught in between an aggressive Israel and an ambitious Iran, yet unlike Tehran, it lacks both the military capability and the political will for independent resistance. This makes the partnership with Pakistan less of a diplomatic gesture, more of a matter of survival. And how likely is it that they would use these provisions to defend Saudi Arabia? Well, in March, after all this stuff kicked off with the U.S. and Israel, Pakistan's foreign minister publicly reminded Tehran, hey, we've got an agreement, we'll protect you with nuclear weapons if the U.S. can't do it. The key issue is that from a factual and legal standpoint, the U.S., not Iran, is the aggressor in this conflict. Tehran is only responding to American strikes. If the roles were reversed and Iran had suddenly initiated attacks on Saudi territory, the legal and political grounds for invoking this agreement between Pakistan and the Saudis would be clear and indisputable. However, in the current context, declaring war on Iran would be equal to joining the U.S. and Israeli military alliance, which would contradict Islamabad's stated neutrality and its positioning as an independent player in the Islamic world. So, as RT is saying, I think they're right. Don't count on them invoking this against Iran. What is happening is Iran is attacking military bases of the U.S. inside of Saudi Arabia. I think they would like to distance themselves from an aggressor country that is going to be dragging them into conflicts, as we should distance ourselves from Israel. It's going to be dragging us into conflicts like this, and we should stop it ourselves. I mean, Israel didn't drag us into this Venezuelan thing. We did that all on our own. And he was emboldened by his easy victory there. Pakistan is sending a signal of deterrence rather than of aggression. Pakistan aims to convey a specific pragmatic message to Tehran. Attacks on Saudi Arabia have certain limits beyond which regional dynamics could shift in unpredictable ways. So go easy right now. It's kind of a veiled threat that is there. Finally, the complex scenario is part of a broader calculation by Islamabad. Pakistan is strategically levering the current crisis to enhance its regional influence in the Middle East. Well, Saudi Arabia has blocked Project Freedom, as I pointed out, by denying U.S. access to bases. Again, getting further and further distant. That is what is happening. Trump wants an empire. But what he's doing is he's destroying the empire. He wanted casinos with his name on them, but he destroyed those casinos as well. Multiple outlets reported this week that the administration is seeking a moratorium on Iranian nuclear enrichment in exchange for the U.S. lifting sanctions and releasing billions in frozen Iranian funds. As part of the deal, the two sides would reportedly lift restrictions on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And so the Iranians replied and said, Americans will not obtain through a failed war what they failed to gain in face-to-face negotiations. And remember, we were negotiating with Jared Kushner and Witkoff, two people who were not elected, not scrutinized and appointed and approved by the U.S. Senate. No, these are people that are just friends of Trump and relatives of Trump. And close friends and relatives, I guess, not relatives, but close friends of Netanyahu. And as they were negotiating with him, they did a surprise attack. Anyway, Iran has its finger on the trigger, they said, and is ready if they do not surrender and grant the necessary concessions, or if they or their devilish hench dog allies. Now, that's one I've not seen before, hench dog. If they continue with what they're doing. Well, the Maersk CEO has warned that the Iran war is a new wake-up call for global trade. Remember, he said the tipping point is clearly June. Remember what they were saying? Well, you're going to drag this thing out through the end of May and into June. They're right up to the line. So the head of one of the world's largest oil traders said the tipping point is clearly June. JP Morgan analysts warned that the world is spiraling towards catastrophic cliff edge shortage of crude oil if the maritime choke point is blocked for another 4 weeks. So that's two different analysts. The first one was head of research at Gunvor. This is a JP Morgan analyst saying the same thing. So we can't keep this together longer than another 4 weeks. So they warned a new wake-up call has emerged beyond energy markets that if the Hormuz choke point remains shuttered, it could severely impact global trade in the coming months. Well, that is what Trump began doing, isn't it? Isn't that his mission? To destroy global trade? To throw a monkey wrench into the global economy? To create a global depression? And I think to drag us into a global world war? It seems like everything that he's doing is trending toward that. He seems to be the guy that they want in place to put all this in. If the conflict extends through June and the choke point remains shuttered, first-order impacts would likely worsen across Asia and Europe. From there, the shock could spread into fuel shortages, factory disruptions, higher shipping costs, broader economic turmoil, and food shortages. Very clearly, food shortages. I think that's already in the cards. So Joe Kent is reminding people that 18 U.S. intelligence agencies said Iran wasn't building a nuke. CIA concluded that Iran could hold out for months. And of course, they were all skeptical of the presentation that was given to Trump by Netanyahu and his Mossad chief. They said it was absolute nonsense, that Israel always did this. That was their response. But Trump went with Netanyahu. All 18 U.S. intelligence agencies had concluded that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon and would retaliate against U.S. bases across the Middle East if the U.S. attacked the country. And, of course, the Strait of Hormuz as well. The report from Kent, Joe Kent, included a story from the Washington Post about a CIA analysis explaining that Iran could withstand American-Israeli attacks for months without suffering severe economic hardship. He also challenged Post columnist Mark Payson, who thinks that Trump should continue the war. And so he says, one of the many tragedies of this war, said Joe Kent, is that before the war began, the U.S. intelligence community, including the CIA, was in agreement that Iran was not developing a nuclear weapon, that Iran would target U.S. bases in the region and would shut down the Strait of Hormuz if they were attacked. And of course, we know all that, and we've been lied to for decades by Netanyahu. So the New York Times report that Trump unwisely listened to Netanyahu, that defeating Iran would be essential. Indeed, Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Netanyahu's presentation of Trump in the White House Situation Room, he called it BS. But he spelled it out. after the CIA chief John Ratcliffe, citing an intelligence analysis of Netanyahu's claims, called them farcical, detached from reality. We have seen Netanyahu detached from reality for decades. So while Trump says that they only have about 18 to 19% of their missiles, they have been showing by what they're doing that he's absolutely not correct. Iran, according to intelligence analysis reported by the Washington Post, says they have about 75% of their pre-war inventories of mobile launchers, about 70% of their pre-war inventory of missiles that they're able to repair, damaged missiles that they're able to manufacture new ones as well. The estimate of Iran's remaining firepower flies in the face of what Trump said just 2 days ago. Well, of course, Trump flies in the face of what Trump said 2 days ago as well. Kent said Trump is left with only a few good options because he must reopen the strait to restart the flow of oil. Aside from rising gas prices that are draining the American workers' bank accounts, looming just over the horizon is a fertilizer crisis that threatens global food supply and could trigger famine in multiple regions. And what's going to happen when there's famine in multiple regions? You're going to have floods of migrants, starving migrants, who are going to come into the first world countries. Remember, Trump said he was against all that, right? And yet his policies bring it about. He's using these policies and these created problems to create a police state. That's what we're going to talk about later. Trump is left with three options. Kent explained. First, reopen the strait by force, which risks the attacks by Iran, not only against U.S. military, which is difficult for them to operate in that narrow area. The threat of attack will deter most shipping companies, effectively shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, if they escalate the fighting, that's going to shut it down completely. You know, you've gone from about 130, 40 to maybe 150 on the high side per day, going through there to about 8 to 10. Well, you can take that to zero if the starting escalates. He said second option is to attack Iran, which seems inevitable, but there is one major issue. Trump has made different statements about what is going on there. He says it's not possible for Iran to have a nuclear weapon and cannot have the ability to enrich uranium at all, while claiming that he defeated them because we destroyed their military equipment and killed their leaders. A war with no clear objective is a surefire invitation for a long and bloody quagmire. And so again, he wants to pretend that he has, on the one hand, destroyed the threat. Then when it's convenient for them, they'll say the threat is imminent. That was what Hegseth got caught on in the cross-examination of the Senate. Well, you said that there was an imminent threat, and yet you have also said, along with Trump, that you destroyed their nuclear capacity. How could both of those things be true? Well, they can't. But he claimed that they could be. No, it's just they aspire to it. Well, their aspirations can't manufacture a threat out of nowhere in no time. It can't be imminent if you just destroyed everything. If the goal is eliminating Iran's enrichment capacity, U.S. boots on the ground is a near certain eventuality, as you just heard from Netanyahu. But of course, it won't be him on the ground. It won't be his son on the ground. Most likely, it won't even be that many Israeli soldiers on the ground. It'll be mostly Americans that they will feed into that conflict. So Mark Tyson wants Trump to finish what he started, because with a peace deal, he said Trump is in danger of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory with a peace deal that would give the battered Iranian regime a new lease on life. Well, if his goal was regime change, he snatched defeat from the jaws of victory with an invasion. If they had people who were resisting Iran, if that wasn't completely manufactured by Israel, if that was genuine, then they shut that down when they attacked Iran with a war of aggression. That moved everybody to the side of the government. Even a bad government picks up the people's support when they are attacked from abroad. And so Kent says Trump should snatch the victory now by declaring victory and bringing our troops home. But instead, he's going to continue to make bad decisions, isn't he? There's absolutely no question about that. Well, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the hantavirus as well as the the golden idolatry that we've got, and the globalists who are behind it, the Zionists who are really behind this. People have put out a narrative. This is being paid for by crypto bros. And yet, we're going to take a look at the people who are really behind it. And there was an excellent, excellent satire piece coming from a guy who wrote it in the perspective of this guy, Mark Burns. Who is Mark Burns? I saw that name and I thought, I've never heard of this guy. He's supposedly a big MAGA pastor. And yet he is, if you look at his credentials, it truly is a sham. We'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, I'm going to talk about the hantavirus, but before I do, because this is really building, I mean, they're pushing this incredibly hard. Over the weekend, today, it is the top of the Drudge Report, as well as many of the mainstream news media. So let's deconstruct that when we get to it. And let's take a look at some of the victories as people wake up to what pharma is doing, what Trump has done in the past, what the World Health Organization is doing. But first, I want to cover some of your comments here. Stealth Patriot, thank you very much for the tip. He says the Democrats are going to win the midterms because of Trump, which is worse, the Marxist communists or the technocrat feudalist stakeholders. What a choice. Two paths, same destination. That's right. They just have different ways to get us there. Both of them lead us to a totalitarian, authoritarian society. So, pick your poison, I guess. Marky Mark, New Jersey, thank you for the tip. He says, when the Democrats take Congress, they'll no doubt end the war and impeach Trump in early 2027. How long will it take to recover from the damage that will be inflicted between now and then? Well, that's a good question. Because, when we look at, again, I think the closest thing we have to this to try to figure out what happened was what happened with the OPEC oil embargo in the early 70s. They quadrupled the price of oil. It stayed there. And the knock-on effects from that lasted for many years, in addition to higher energy costs. And that was much smaller impact than what we're looking at here. That was only directed at the United States. And it was done by the suppliers. There was no destruction of production as there has been in this war. So there's been bombs dropped on facilities that process the oil, that ship the oil, and other things like that. And it's going to take a while to rebuild that, as well as to get the oil flowing again. And I think that is the key issue, is that this is different in terms of both the magnitude of the damage and in terms of the magnitude of oil that was disrupted. When we look at the United States, that was, again, only directed at the United States. And at that point in time, we only imported 19% of our oil from abroad. And what they put in there as OPEC, that was most of our oil, but still, it was only 15% of just the oil coming into the United States. And yet it had global implications. Everybody suffered from that Because again, it's a global market. If you don't have oil in one country, you're going to go to another country and try to get that oil. And so the price is going to skyrocket. And it did stay up after that. So we'll have to see what happens with this. And I've always said from the beginning, I think it's going to be much worse than that. That went on for 5 months. If we go into June, we will be looking at something that lasted for what, 4 months? Let's see. We got March, April, May. Yeah, well, 3 months. If it goes in beyond that, if it goes into 4 months or 5 months, then it starts to get really, really bad. Because again, the amount of oil that has been stopped is much bigger than it was back with the OPEC oil embargo. Soylent Goy says, looks like Iran already won and the U.S. is just trying to figure out how to not look like losers. That's exactly it. I mean, he's forced to make some kind of a deal because of the Strait of Hormuz. It's not that Donald Trump cares. It's just that he's going to have the entire world after him if he doesn't open up the Strait of Hormuz. That's the only thing he cares about. Patriot Girl 1 says, no diesel, no food. That's right. And no fertilizer either, right? Well, let's take a look at what's going on in a positive way. Oklahoma and Louisiana are going to require coroners to include vaccine records in autopsies of children who died from quote-unquote SIDS. And as Children's Self-Defense points out, a child never dies from unknown causes. And yet that's what they've been treating with this. They've been treating it as if they're so true. And there was a sea change in what was happening with all this stuff decades ago. Now what they're talking about doing is actually trying to figure out what it is. Kids don't die from unknown causes. Let's try to figure out what is causing this. Let's try to figure out what's causing autism. But you notice how these people get so upset if you start collecting data about autism, if you start collecting data about SIDS. Why is that? Well, because real science is based on first collecting the data and then seeing if there's a correlation with this stuff. What they're doing is propaganda for profit. And that's why they don't want you to look at this stuff. They know as well as we do, it's the vaccines. And they don't want you looking at that stuff. So what they're saying is these laws would require coroners to document any vaccines that were administered within 90 days of death on the autopsy reports for children under the age of 15 who died unexpectedly and without explanation. Why wouldn't we want to collect as much information as we could about children who died, so maybe we could figure out why they're dying, whether you're talking about sudden death from myocarditis or something like that, as well as the wellness vaccines that are there. But they don't want people to look. So 2 states this week moved to require the vaccine records be included in the autopsy reports of children who die from unexplained causes. On Thursday, a Louisiana bill called A Voice for the Voiceless passed the House with a 76-12 vote. It wasn't even close. The Senate unanimously passed the bill in March. Now it is headed to the desk of Governor Jeff Landry, who is expected to sign. He has been on the side of health freedom and informed consent many times already. So even though they may be sending people like Mike Johnson and I think, Senator Cassidy is actually from Louisiana, I think. And he is a real vaccine pusher in the Senate, if ever there was one. Remember, this is the guy who was writing roughshod over anybody that had said anything questioning vaccines. That was going to be disqualifying for him in terms of people they wanted to appoint to HHS or FDA or anything like that. He, I think, is facing some pushback in Louisiana as well. He may not get reelected. Medical researcher and SIDS expert Neil Z. Miller, author of numerous books on vaccine safety, said a child never dies from unknown causes. He said there's always a reason for death. Often that reason is vaccines, but medical examiners may be hesitant to list vaccines as a probable cause due to the intense pressure from medical colleagues. Let's understand, it's not medical colleagues. It is the corporations that have taken over the hospitals and are running them for profit. It is the corporations that are pushing the vaccines. That's where they're getting the pressure. Legislation would relieve that pressure. Other states have introduced similar bills, but they appear to all have stalled. Iowa had a bill. It advanced to the Health Committee in January, but it has not been updated since. Florida had a bill that died in health policy, according to a Florida Senate website. And then you had Minnesota bill that was introduced over a year ago, listed as a current bill in the Senate, but no actions have been taken since it was introduced. You had another bill, a Mississippi bill, that died in committee. So this is what's happening with them. But it only takes one or two states. If you go through and get the information and put that out there, that could be the issue. Make it an issue and get people's attention. Patrick McMath, the state senator who sponsored the bill, said the next stop is Governor Landry's desk. With his signature, Louisiana becomes the first state to include this vital information in the reporting of unexplained children's deaths. And he said to gather data and to see whether or not a correlation exists. And again, why in the world would you oppose this unless you've got something to hide? It makes absolutely no sense, but it shows the callous disregard for the lives of children. This predatory pharmaceutical industry has been focused on poisoning and killing kids since Fauci helped them 40 years ago, 1986. So Landry has in the past been a real advocate for health freedom. He stopped COVID vaccines as Attorney General. He stopped the COVID vaccines from being added to the state's school immunization schedule. He also filed an amicus brief in support of Children's Health Defense, groundbreaking lawsuit against legacy news media members of the Trusted News Initiative. Well, we're trying to censor any talk and questioning of this. And of course, science is skepticism. If you don't have any skepticism, you're not doing science, right? It should be the ultimate show me your data, prove it to me, right? And yet, no, you do what the authorities say. That is not science. Never has been. That is academic and it is political. And Francis Bacon, when he created the scientific method, deliberately rejected that. He says we don't want to have institutions and authorities telling us what is true and what is not. We want to do a scientific method, which means we collect data, we do tests, and we determine what is true based on that. It was also under Landry that the Louisiana Department of Public Health shared its infant mortality data and immunization data with Children's Health Defense Science Team. An analysis of that data found that infants vaccinated in their second month of life were more likely to die in their third month than unvaccinated infants. Female and black infants died at a higher rate than male or white babies. So, well, this should get the DEI people really upset, shouldn't it? SIDS diagnosis is given when an infant under the age of 1 dies suddenly, typically during sleep, and an investigation of the death fails to yield a cause. 95% of SIDS deaths occur in the first 6 months of life, peaking at the ages of 2 to 4 months. U.S. records more than 5 infant deaths per 1,000 live births. That is far exceeding the rates in other high-income countries. Well, because we vaccinate more. After birth defects and premature birth, SIDS is the third leading cause of death among infants. But the medical industry claims to remain puzzled about the cause. And yet, while they are puzzled, they do not want to investigate. So I don't think they're puzzled at all. I think they suspect just like we do that we know what is causing this. As a matter of fact, I was going to play, but I didn't put in the deck the woman who, when they started talking about sudden adult death syndrome, remember she did the video clip. I played it so many times on the show. It's heartbreaking. And she starts to cry and she says, I realized when they started to do that that's what happened to my child. And I killed my child when I took him in for a wellness visit. And they got vaccinated and died a couple of days later. And she said, it has destroyed my life losing that child. And, everything in her life had been turned upside down, and she couldn't cope with it. And she realized that these vaccines were the cause of death. The National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, this is the 1986 program that was put in order to hold the vaccine companies harmless for the damage that they do. That should be the end of it right there for people, right? If you look at this And they say, well, we have to give them legal immunity because they're inherently unsafe. And that's what they said. If that's what they say, that should be enough right there. And you should say, well, if they don't believe in the product, I don't either. If they are so afraid of the safety of their product that they go to the government to get protected from the damage that they do, just like glyphosate, which Trump is doing for them now as well. If that's the case, then we know what is happening here. They're buying their way through all of this with the politicians who are letting them kill people for profit. The National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program recently awarded payouts to 2 families of infants who died suddenly from allegedly undetermined causes, according to medical examiners following vaccination. So this tribunal that operates not as a trial, but they operate as an arbitration process, they know that it's the vaccines that did. They just awarded it to 2 families. And as they point out here, nobody ever came up with anything called SIDS until the late 1960s. In the early 1960s, the number of vaccines administered to most U.S. infants increased. That's when they started picking it up, right? And that's why I say we have a higher rate because we have a higher rate of many different types of vaccines that we give to very young children than any other country. As the rates rose of deaths, so did parental concern that it was connected to vaccination. Before 1979, the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems included a cause of death classification that was associated with, quote, prophylactic vaccination. It was included as an official cause of death. However, in 1979, they revised that and they removed that category completely. So there is no category for kids being killed by prophylactic vaccination. In other words, we're going to vaccinate the kids before they catch a disease. Of course, that's the whole point. All vaccination is prophylactic. They're supposed to keep you from catching something. That's why they're developing vaccines for hantavirus. And yet the question is, have they isolated it? They're not even sure if it is transmissible from human to human because they haven't isolated any of this stuff. There's a real disease out there, but do they know or care about the real cause? Have they isolated this to the extent that they could do a vaccine? And again, I don't believe any of this virology stuff anymore. I'm done with it. You should read the book from the Baileys, Sam Bailey and her husband. I forget what his name is. They're both physicians. They put everything on the line and told the truth. And it's called The Last Pandemic. And they debunk virology and vaccines, I think, thoroughly, especially if you go back and look at the one of the ones that stood out the most, which I didn't know anything about, was the Cold House in the UK. For 45 years, they tried everything they could to transmit a cold. They would sneeze in people's faces. The volunteers that were there for a vacation, they would transfer mucus from one patient to the other. They could not transfer it. And so the question is, what is causing it? Well, we'll just say that it's a virus, and then we're going to give you a cold vaccine every year, a flu vaccine. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. Instead of examining the link between vaccines and SIDS, public health researchers developed a triple risk model to explain SIDS. According to that model, SIDS occurs when a baby has an unknown medical condition, is going through an important period of development where the body changes quickly, and then encounters an outside stressor, such as sleeping on its stomach. Because of this model, it's not uncommon for law enforcement to blame parents when babies die after vaccination. So you have the medical community and pediatricians lying to parents, intimidating them, or in some cases forcing them to vaccinate their kids, and then the parents get blamed when the child dies. You had them sleeping on their stomach or something, right? So this is a sad state of affairs, but I think it will change if they start collecting the data. And you only need to have one state do it. It looks like it's going to happen in Louisiana. Oklahoma is getting close. As I pointed out before, there's a half dozen other states that tried to do it, and it got stopped because of lobbyists. And that may or may not happen in Oklahoma, but if Louisiana gets it through, and it looks like it's going to happen, unanimously passed in the Senate, almost unanimously passed in the House, and you've got a governor who is very sympathetic to health freedom and to having transparency in terms of collecting and publishing the data. So then that brings us to this hantavirus scare. They're pulling everything they did before. They're going around with evacuation of hantavirus-stricken cruise ship concludes for the day. This is a headline from CNN. Passengers could be seen wearing protective clothing and masks, making a parade out of all this stuff, as you saw in the early days of the COVID lie. And even to the extent that the UK has parachuted in a bunch of health. They got one person who they have identified and diagnosed as having hantavirus. So they've sent in a team of military experts to treat this one person. It's pretty crazy. 17 American citizens have been on board the hantavirus-stricken cruise ship as it underwent a quarantine period at sea. Again, no mention of rats from the public health people. That has always been determined as the cause of so-called hantavirus disease. And it was on the news with Gene Hackman's wife. They said it was they had a very large house and there were areas that were very filthy with rat feces and that type of thing. And that has always been the case in the past. And now what they're trying to do is make it into some kind of a pandemic that everybody can transfer human to human. But again, even when you look at this on a cruise ship, you could imagine that they might have problems with rats, except that patient zero was somebody who he and his wife were bird watchers, and they went to a landfill area and hung out there. You think there's any rats in the landfill? The group will be transported to the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which is home to the National Quarantine Unit, a federally funded facility. On arrival, the U.S. passengers will be checked for any symptoms signaling early stages of the virus, such as fever, muscle aches, and diarrhea. They did this with COVID. I remember seeing people come in, and they had everybody in hazmat suits. They moved them into quarters to look at it. And again, when you look at what is happening at Drudge Report, a race to track the rat virus passengers, a global effort to stop the spread. And this was on Friday, and he's still doing it as of today. As Brownstone Institute article says, Stop the Spread is back. Hollywood loves a good sequel. Unfortunately, they don't produce good sequels, and neither does the World Health Organization. We've seen the plot before. We didn't like the first movie, and this one is a poor imitation of the first movie. Since COVID, there's been several attempted disease scares, things like Mpox, remember that? Swine flu, bird flu, chikungunya, measles, but nothing has really caught the attention of audiences and the press like the hantavirus frenzy. And again, the World Health Organization is jumping in on this with both feet. Here is Tedros, the Marxist bureaucrat who has absolutely no training or experience in medical issues.
And the request I made was based on international health regulation. And countries are expected to cooperate based on that international health regulation. But not only the IHR, I think we should also be strong believers of solidarity. Solidarity because that's our best immunity. It's only when we support each other that we can respond more effectively to virus or to outbreaks like this. And it's also a moral duty.
A moral duty and a legal duty to do what this guy says. A Marxist who has no medical experience. No regular person has ever heard of such a disease for the longest time. Basically, before this happened with Gene Hackman's family, nobody had ever heard of this. It's kind of like, autism and things like that they had to explain to people when they wanted to incorporate that into Rain Man. They had to explain to people what autism was. Nobody had heard of it at that point. There's a reason for nobody having heard of this. It's very rare, and human-to-human spread is nearly unknown. Nearly unknown. So next up, we have a reprisal of the plague ship motif, like the Diamond Princess, another cruise ship. And if you remember that, that was a cruise ship. They said, well, we got a lot of people on board here who have COVID. And I looked at it and I said this when it was happening. I said, if and we look at the cruise ships, the demographics tend to be older. It's not unusual for somebody who is on a cruise ship to have to be medevaced off of it. When we took a cruise, that happened as well. And so you got an older demographic. They're not in great shape. And so it's not unusual for something like that to happen. Well, they decided that had COVID. And if you remember, there was a guy, they parked off the coast of Japan, and there was a guy who was a virologist. And he said, you know, I have been in Africa where they had, let's see, what was it? What was that disease that came to Dallas? Ebola. He said there was an Ebola outbreak. And he said, this is scarier than that. Because he said there's absolutely no precautions taken on this ship. And so I said, okay, so you got people who are elderly, probably not in the best health, and you've got absolutely no precautions being taken. They're all contained in this ship. So you would expect that there would be a lot of people who would get sick and a good number who would die. Except there wasn't a lot of people who got sick with this. In spite of all the fear that this guy had, who had been at an Ebola outbreak, he didn't see that happening with the Diamond Princess. And I said, look at this. And then remember you had a ship where there was somebody who was diagnosed as having COVID, probably just had a cold. And so the captain of the ship took it to port and got everybody off the ship. I think that was the end of his command. I think they relieved him of duty at that point in time because I think the Pentagon knew it was a bluff, but he didn't know. They hadn't clued him in on it. And the reality is that it didn't spread, and they didn't have much. I think they had one or two people that got pretty sick, but that was it. Because most of the people on the military ship are going to be in a much better state of fitness. They're going to be younger. And so what are they diagnosing with this stuff? Is it really a pandemic, or is it general health issues that all of us have as we get older? And so it's headed to the Canary Islands, where 3 people died, 2 of them with lab-confirmed hantavirus. Let's talk about that, lab confirmed. Is this a PCR test? Do we have to go through all the stuff about PCR that makes it so dodgy? The guy who put it together was complaining about Fauci when Fauci was abusing it for HIV. And so I don't think we need to go back and revisit all the PCR stuff, but they don't tell us. How'd they confirm it in the lab? Have they isolated the virus? Remember when we had the lady in Canada who was going through all that? She started asking public health organizations all over the world. She started, have you isolated the virus? Most of them said no. A lot of them said, well, they all said no. A lot of them said, we never do that. We never isolate a virus. And so she started looking at this and said, well, maybe this is a bigger problem than just COVID. And that is a key data point, folks. So again, is this a dirty ship, or is this a pandemic that they're trying to exploit and trying to create? And just remember, Tedros and World Health Organization says you have a duty to obey our IHR, our international health regulations. A flight attendant who came in contact with a dead body is now hospitalized and in rough condition, suggesting that even coming close to a person with hantavirus is risky stuff. No one can figure out how this is even possible, however. It is so mysterious, so unusual, so terrifying, and I'm not ready to jump in and take their word on it. These are people who never isolate these diseases. They don't apply science to this, as they were pointing out, even when it came to Louis Pasteur, when he was going through and making his pronouncements about viruses. Of course, bacteria you can see, but for the viruses, he couldn't measure that. And so what he was saying was, well, I think these sheep over here have it, and it was purely subjective. They had not gone through the scientific method. They had not said, well, here's some sheep that are sick, and we're going to put them with the sheep that are well. And then we're going to have another control group over it. They didn't do any of that stuff. They didn't isolate it. They didn't identify it. And they didn't even try what you and I would think they would obviously do. That was never done. That didn't come out until the 1990s about Pasteur and that fraud. It was released in a diary that his family had. And again, it is the same type of thing they tried to do at the UK Cold House for 45 years, and were never able to get that done either. We need to go back and look at the quote-unquote science behind all this stuff. Fauci tells us that he is science, and what he's telling us is what I say is authoritative, and you do it. That is not science. He is not science, and his method is not scientific. So again, did this flight attendant, how did that person get sick with that? I don't know. And they don't know either. What we do know is we've never seen this hantavirus stuff being transmitted person to person. Maria Van Kerkhove, with a Stanford University pedigree, is now a go-to authority. She is now science. And she said back during the pandemic, she went to Wuhan in 2020. She said, achieving China's exceptional coverage with and adherence to these containment measures in terms of the lockdowns that were extreme and got even more extreme, if you remember what they were doing in Shanghai, locking people into into their homes and their high-rise communities. You could hear the wailing at night. Many close observers credit her report with inspiring the worldwide lockdown of all nations but 4 in the following weeks. And she still works for the WHO. There's no mechanism in place for her to be held accountable for her role. There's no known cure, but a vaccine is now in development by Moderna. As a matter of fact, they are not the only ones. There are quite a few companies and institutions that have been working on a hantavirus vaccine. Now, why would that be? Because they've not had a situation where this is contagious, except around people around rats. Why wouldn't you focus on hygiene? Why wouldn't you focus on trying to get rid of rats? As a matter of fact, when we were talking about this, Lance said that, where was it, Lance? Alberta? Was that where? Yeah, Alberta, Canada. They basically eliminated rats there. And they went through some pretty authoritarian processes to do that. He said it caught his attention because of what they were doing, going around with surprise inspections on people's homes and mandatory traps and all the rest of the stuff. But they got rid of rats because rats are filthy and they spread disease. And we look at the bubonic plague, or they look at the hantavirus or whatever. It is, they can spread these diseases. They can do it with the fleas that are on them. Any number of ways it can be transmitted. And so it is not the pandemic that they want it to be. Keep in mind, says, well, I can't hear you. What's up?
Sorry, my microphone is not working.
Okay, his microphone's not working. Okay. Well, keep in mind, no high institution in the U.S. has repudiated the lockdowns, even if 2/3 of the public believe that they were pointlessly damaging. The call for COVID justice, which is a petition, now has 3,300 signatures, but not enough to cause the Senate, House, or any other legislative body to speak clearly that this will never be tolerated again. As a matter of fact, to this day, the plan of the World Health Organization is the same as the very first one of these germ games, Dark Winter, which took place 2 months before 9/11. And that is to lock down everybody until they've got an emergency vaccine prepared. Still the same strategy. The Biden plan was for a 130-day lockdown in the event of a new pandemic. So they went from 2 weeks or 14 days to flatten the curve to 130 days, about a factor of 10. Meanwhile, when you look at this, I played the clip for you with Tedros. He says that it is now a moral obligation for nations to submit to and to believe in his global health order. They were never able to get the pandemic treaty pushed through. So now they make it a moral obligation for you to do it. It's not a legal obligation. Countries are expected to cooperate based on international health regulations, he said, even though they couldn't push through their power grab with a pandemic treaty. As I mentioned before, the UK has sent in an army parachute team, medical team, to help one single British citizen that they claim has got hantavirus. When you start to see this kind of overreach from governments, from the military, We should start paying attention to this. So they have 6 paratroopers, an RAF consultant, an Army medic from 16 Air Assault Brigade were dropped in, oxygen supplies, medical equipment airdropped into an isolated island. I mean, seriously, when you look at this, how many times do you have a situation where somebody is in a foreign country and the government or something happens to them in a crime capacity, and the government just blows it off and says, well, we can't help you. Sorry about that. You go to the embassy for help and they can't help you. They won't help you. And yet, when they send in 6 paratroopers, all this medical equipment, you know that this is something besides just stupidity. Well, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny has an op-ed piece, and it was published on Expose News. She said, the fear machine is starting again, and this time you should recognize it. And you should speak out and oppose it as well. Creating fear before providing context. Just like the previous so-called outbreaks of COVID, monkeypox, bird flu, hantaviruses are a class of viruses that they say can infect humans, typically through inhalation of aerosoled rodent urine, feces, or saliva, with human-to-human spread being very rare. And again, I don't know that that's what it is. I mean, you had the bubonic plague because of the rats. That wasn't an aerosol thing that you're breathing. It was, that was not the vector which it was passed. They want to make all of these things about aerosol, about breathing. You got to mask up, you got to isolate. The outcome that they want is driving their diagnosis of the way that this is transmitted. Yes, people are getting sick. However, they, I don't think, have the correct diagnosis, certainly not the correct disease vectors. Despite the low number of cases and deaths worldwide over decades, there are already 13 documented hantavirus vaccines and gene therapy programs in active development. Think about that. You got all these public health rats who are jumping on board this hantavirus ship. Watching the headlines unfold this week feels like watching a rerun of a movie, she said. You got a virus outbreak on a cruise ship, emergency evacuations, hospital escorts, contact tracing across multiple countries, media outlets flooding the public with alarming updates before most people even know what a hantavirus is. So, again, I think the big tell are the number of programs out there creating, quote-unquote, vaccines to stop this. She points out before a 1993 outbreak in the Four Corners region of the Southwest, where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet, only 31 hantavirus cases had ever been reported in history. 24 previously healthy young adults who suddenly developed fever, muscle ache, and rapidly progressive respiratory failure. Within days, there were a few deaths. So the deaths resulted in what became known as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Do you remember hysterically hearing about this from the CDC or local health departments? Yeah, I don't either, she said. Nobody said anything about that. And yet, after the 1993 outbreak, the CDC began national surveillance for hantavirus infections. And yet they didn't see anything. Still, as of the end of 2023, after 30 years, they had 890 confirmed hantavirus disease cases had been reported nationwide. 30 years and 890 of them, about 30 a year, right? And it worked out that they had a case fatality rate of approximately 35. Again, just like we saw with COVID, and we talked about this incessantly, is this properly identified? Is this traditional pneumonia or some other respiratory disease, or is it COVID? Because you remember the statistics that we got from the CDC, and I'll never forget Mike Adams of Natural News, and he was guest hosting, pushing the panic button all the time at InfoWars. I was walking out one day, and he was putting up a CDC chart and saying, look at this. Now everybody is dying of COVID, not even dying of flu or cold, and not, more COVID deaths than we have of heart disease, of cancer, and all the rest of the stuff. And I thought, Mike, you're just repeating this CDC propaganda. There's no basis for any of this stuff, which we further on found out was true. Anyway, the cases that found in the United States were not believed to have spread from person to person. Long-term CDC surveillance has demonstrated that hantavirus activity fluctuates with environmental conditions that influence rodent populations. And so the Hegelian principles are Problem, reaction, solution. The problem is a pathogen. The reaction is hysteria. The solution is a vaccine. Oh, also lockdown and a vaccine, really. And so this is the amazing thing to me. As rare as this was, again, unheard of before 1993. When it happened, they started surveillance, and they could only find about 30, quote unquote, cases a year. And we don't even know that those were true because they'd not isolated it. But there are now 13 documented hantavirus vaccine and gene therapy programs in active development. Again, gene therapy, notice. You got 6 DNA vaccines from the U.S. Army, many of them needle-free. They use a jet injector version. It is DNA gene therapy. Any excuse to do that, right? You've got 3 mRNA vaccines being developed, one by Moderna. You have 2 viral vector vaccines from UK institutions. You have 1 inactivated vaccine that's used in South Korea, and you have 1 protein subunit vaccine. And so again, for something, all of this, for something that is so incredibly rare, most people had never heard of it. They couldn't find it even when they were looking for it for the most part. Why are we not talking about rodent control? Why are we not talking about environmental hygiene and targeted risk awareness? Why are we only focusing immediately on some kind of a genetic code injection, which is what I call the COVID vaccine, the Trump shot from the very beginning? I called it the GCI because it's like, doesn't this create suspicion? We are no longer live in a world where a small outbreak is simply a local event. Today, a few infections can mobilize an entire international system of control overnight. Quarantines, travel restrictions, surveillance, and emergency authorizations. Expanded government power. Fear sells, and during COVID, those in power learned that they could weaponize the fear into the most effective tool for controlling public behavior. They got away with it, folks. We let them get away with it. We just walked away when we'd had enough and just let it drop. Bad idea. If the COVID years taught us anything, it should be that urgency is often used to rush us past scrutiny and critical thinking about what's really going on. As a matter of fact, one of the things, and I'll go back and talk about, since we're right at the point of Fauci getting his, being at the point of statute of limitations so they can't come after him for his lying to Congress. That's the only thing they're concerned about. And the reality is that, Rand Paul hit him for saying, Dr. Fauci, you're creating vaccine hesitancy with all this stuff. And you were involved in gain of function. You created this pandemic. Rand Paul is selling you the idea that the pandemic was real as opposed to a manufactured MacGuffin to scare people. That's what I have a problem with Rand Paul about. I got a big problem with that. That's why we did that, the monster jab, around Halloween. I said, the monster is the jab. It's not something that Fauci created in a lab. The jab is the bioweapon. And it's a big disservice to everybody. Republicans and people like Rand Paul to come after Fauci and to come after look, they mandated it. Well, that's only part of the problem. The real problem is that Trump lied to you about a pandemic. He locked everybody down. He destroyed the economy and so many other things. And then he created a bioweapon. And then he handed it over to Biden so that the two sides could point at the other side and say, you're the one who did it. They both did it. It was bipartisan. It was a tag team match. And they're still doing that in the aftermath. They're still saying, well, maybe it's this gain of function that really created something that escaped out of the lab. No, they created a phony pandemic. They didn't do it with a lab. They did it with media. And they did it with fear. So again, that was Dr. Sherry Pandemic. This is the moment, she says, to remember the pain of past pandemic rhetoric. And we can't afford another one of these. And so we need to speak out about this. And again, as I said before, what was patient zero? Everything points to this being contact with rats, just like it was with Gene Hackman's wife. Patient zero was a bird watcher who went to a landfill because landfills always attract a lot of birds, right? And so he was 70 years old. He was traveling for a long period of time on cruise ships, he and his wife, retired. And so she accompanied his body, and she also got sick, and she also died. The two of them were on a 5-month trip to South America prior to that. So did she come in contact with something at the landfill? Like bubonic plague or something like that? Or did she come in contact with whatever got on him? It doesn't have to be a virus that is spread by respiratory issues. That serves their agenda. They want to lock you down and isolate you. So that's going to be the way they tell you these diseases are transmitted. So they were in northern Patagonia, where 101 cases of the disease, including 32 deaths, over the last several months. 2 suspected cases of hantavirus in people that were not on the cruise ship have been linked to a Dutch Meerjam. So again, a Dutch flight attendant was hospitalized in Amsterdam with a suspected case of the virus after contact with a Dutch woman, but later tested negative. And yet, I can't tell you how many of these articles I've gone through, and they say, well, see, you had a flight attendant who got sick and was around these people. But she tested negative, even with their supposed PCR test or whatever they're using. Again, we don't even know what they're doing in terms of the test. We don't know if they've isolated it. We have seen this game before, and they didn't bother to do that. And then they ramped up the PCR tests, and as Carrie Mullis, who got the Nobel Prize for developing it, said, if you take the magnification up high enough, you can find anything, anywhere, and anyone. If you take the results of his test and you magnify it, in some of these cases, 1 trillion times, yes, you're going to find anything that you're looking for. None of the ship's passengers currently show symptoms of the virus. Again, just like the Diamond Princess, if this was something people had to be concerned about, if this was really contagion, you would see this all over the place because they're locked up in these small quarters and they don't have good hygiene to start with. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Before we do, I want to read some of the comments here. DG8, thank you for the tip. He said, David, MAGA is blinded on how bad they're losing. They still can't see the bloodbath in the midterms that's coming up, the presidential election. Amy Acton in Ohio is bad, but I will not vote for Vivek. Yeah, she's the Democrat nominee, and Vivek is the Republican nominee. And he is one of these pharma bros. I mean, Vivek, as well as J.D. Vance, are out there working on self-replicating and magnifying mRNA. I mean, these people are the plague manufacturers, and they're going to get rich doing it as well. Stay tuned to the heroes for Hanta, the dancing nurses with rat doctors. There we go. Maybe they can use the Nutcracker suite. They had the Rat King that was there. That's what we need. They're going to start busting our nuts here on this thing. I tell you, that's anyway. DG8, thank you for the tip. He said, well, I just read that one, or did I? David, do you think MAGA cult will wake up to who Trump is when he pushes vaccines and locks the country down again? I think 2/3 will resist. 100% will claim he's listening to the wrong people. Yeah, that's right. That was the excuse before. And he put those people in. Hatchcar61, Moderna developed a hantavirus vaccine last year. Is that a coincidence? And again, it's not just Moderna. 13 different organizations, and the Army is focusing specifically on a DNA vaccine. Everything is there, folks, for us to see. Marky Mark, New Jersey, thank you for the tip. He says, Dave, do you think the Dems will end the war when they take over Congress next year? Will they give in to the TDS, or will they listen to AIPAC, which contributes to both parties? Well, I really don't know what they're going to do about that. I think they have criticized this to the extent that they will take a step back or so. I don't expect them to fully abandon the Zionists that are there. But there are some people in the Democrat Party, people like Fetterman, who is so hardcore Zionist that he wants to go to war with his own party. But I don't know. There'll be more resistance for sure from the Democrats than there will be from the Republicans, because Trump and so many Republicans are now fully owned by the Zionists. So it would be less, but maybe not sufficient to stop it. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. Dougda007, SIDS is caused by unknown stressors, such as an infant sleeping on its stomach. That sounds ridiculous, because it is ridiculous. It absolutely is. And kids were sleeping on their stomach a long time before that. And again, what changed? Was it the number of vaccines? Was it what we put in the vaccines, the adjuvants and other things like that? Patty Wax says they've marketed so many things so that your baby does not die in their sleep, and yet they refuse to look at the vaccines. That's right. Put them on their backs, their sides, their tummies, put them on bumper pads, take out the bumper pads, use the pillow device to keep them on their side, remove all pillow devices. It's all sick. How awful on SIDS. I spent so many hours checking to see if my kids were still alive. Yeah, the key thing you need to do is not necessarily be so concerned about whether they're sleeping on their stomach or their back. Keep them away from the pediatricians, especially if you don't have a pediatrician that understands what vaccines are about. As a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why Travis and his wife go back periodically for a good while to Austin so they can see the pediatrician they've got there. They weren't able to find one here yet that does not do vaccines. And that pediatrician is struggling to the extent that you basically buy a membership in order to go to that pediatric group that's there, because they make it impossible for pediatricians. They punish them through the insurance agencies and through compensation. They punish them if they don't vaccinate the kids. What does that tell you? Why would the insurance companies demand that you get a certain compliance level of vaccines, or you get your insurance reimbursements cut significantly, so significantly that it'll put you out of business? Epstein Island says, I'm still getting called a conspiracy theorist by some people online when I bring up that COVID-19 was a fake pandemic. Yeah, they will never admit to it. It says, Jews are already censoring the internet, can't protest what's going on in Gaza if you're in Florida, or you get arrested and charged with a felony. And that should be another wake-up call. To me, that, if you're going to start criminally prosecuting people and coming after the First Amendment as DeSantis and the Republican Party has done in Florida, as the Trump administration wants to do, that is a smoking gun, just like the 1986 Vaccine Compensation Act. That is saying, well, this speech is so dangerous that we have to ban it. Well, there's no such thing as dangerous speech. The danger is in censorship. If something is true, it can withstand the scrutiny. And the fact that they have to punish people who question them tells you everything about what they're trying to tell you and trying to convince you. Narrow Way, Narrow Gate Ministry says 1999 X-Files Season 7, Episode 12, aired in 2000, said FEMA was going to suspend constitutional rights over a hantavirus outbreak. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And again, that was 7 years after they'd had the first discovery of labeled something a hantavirus, I should say. Patty Wax, I was thinking how convenient it is that Trump is back in office, for this. And also to break everything in terms of our supply chains and all the rest of this. Dougalog, if it takes up to 8 weeks to become so sick from hantavirus, they didn't get it from the ship. Here's what I saw when I looked. Initial symptoms, 1 to 8 weeks. Fever, deep muscle aches, thighs, hips, back, headaches, dizziness. Then a progression, 4 to 10 days later. If not treated, the illness can rapidly progress to severe life-threatening breathing difficulties and fluid in the lungs. And again, patient 0 and his wife went on shore bird watching at a landfill. That's where they got it. It wasn't even the rats on board the ship, assuming that they do have rats on board the ship. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Elvis
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
and the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
All right, welcome back. And Lance was just telling me during the break, because we're having some microphone problems, he was telling me that he'd looked up that to see that there's 2 weeks before you have any symptoms. So again, how long were these cruises? Now, that couple that was on the 5-month cruise, that was not all on that boat, I don't think. I think they'd switched boats. They were the only ones who went to that landfill, nevertheless.
Yeah, it was 2 to 3 weeks before there are any symptoms whatsoever, and another 4 to 10 days before you get serious symptoms. And the first symptoms are things like headache, dizziness, and fever.
Which, it could be a lot of different things, yeah.
Yeah, one of these articles said the cruise ship was a month long, but I don't know if that was, intended to be a month long, or when did the problems start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they were lost at sea for a long time. Nobody would let them pull into a port. So you got another disease cruise ship that's there. But I want to talk about what's going on here with the golden Trump idol. And it's kind of interesting because always before this, we were told that this was put together by a bunch of crypto bros who paid several $1,000s to have this gold statue of Trump made because they're trying to curry favor with him. Then we see that everything is being put out there by a pastor who put all this stuff together, Pastor Mark Burns, who I had never heard of, but I'm going to give you his background here in just a moment. But let's take a look at what actually happened here. What you're going to see as part of this ceremony is Mark Burns called Trump on his cell phone, and then he put the microphone up to the cell phone. That's why it sounds so strange here.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank you so much for being there today, and more importantly, for what you did. The statue is beautiful. I saw it.
It's gold, and look at this. It's got
PGA tournament.
Blue and white material.
A great champion.
Colors of Israel,
champion,
striped hanging over it as
great
well.
Tournament, and I got to look at it very closely, and it's incredible. And I just want to thank you. I know it was done from love, and I want to thank Mark Burns, a pastor. He's a good pastor. He's a good man. I've known him a long time. He's been with me from the beginning, right from the beginning. Maybe about 2 days later, right? 2 days. But
right, Mr. President.
he was right at the beginning, and I appreciate it, Mark. You're great, and just really a good person. And I want to thank everybody there. I don't know, here there's a good crowd of people, but I want to thank you all, and I won't forget it. And we love you all, and the country's doing great. And Iran is not doing good because of us. They are not doing
And they overlaid the image with pure gold. They were as children who had lost their faith. They were perverse and crooked and rebellious against God. They did eat the bread of wickedness and drank the wine of violence.
They drank the wine of violence. And they cannot even thank people for coming to a statue dedication without bragging about his violence. This guy is a spiritual advisor to Trump. Well, advise him. Tell him what Christianity is about, if you know yourself. I don't think he does. As a matter of fact, you look at Mark Burns, this is a guy with a suspect resume at best. It's putting it politely. He said, it's a celebration of life and a powerful symbol of resilience, freedom, patriotism, courage, and the will to keep fighting for America. Well, this is not, that's what he says. That's what Mark Burns says. But Mark, this is not what the world sees. He says, let me be very clear. We worship the Lord Jesus Christ and him alone. That's not what the rest of us see there. It was unveiled amid broader criticism about what opponents increasingly see as personality-driven branding around Trump, whether you're talking about his Bibles or his sneakers, or the fact that he wants to have a gold commemorative coin with his image on it for the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. He wants his signature on the currency. He wants his picture on passports. He wants his picture on park passes. It's just amazing what this guy is doing. His name on buildings, his big banners of his picture being put up on Homeland Security buildings, other things like that, like he's some kind of Marxist dictator or totalitarian leader, because he is. He does everything by emergency decree, and he skips the Constitution. So they want to tell you this is funded by 6,000 patriots who are just trying to make money off of a meme coin, right? I don't think there's any patriotism in that. I think it's being done out of the love of money. And, of course, when you look at the crypto guys that are out there, it's not really the crypto guys. There's some big Zionist money that is there. And you can even see how they draped it in white and light blue, the colors of Israel. Yeah, it's, I want to say it's a lot, 6,000 patriots. How much of the money came from the billionaires and how much of it came from some individuals out there? Trump himself celebrated the event, sharing an image of the statue on social media, calling it the real deal because it is covered with gold. And I think that is the key thing. You know, I stopped and thought about it. There's a couple of things about Trump and his self-worship. And of course, he worships himself. He's a narcissist. That's what narcissists do. They worship themselves. But he's being worshipped by other people as well. And here's why I say it's worship. First of all, we have statues of political leaders and other people and have had for the longest time because they represent values of freedom or because of their life achievement or whatever. We typically wait until after that person is dead so that we know everything about their life. That's why you typically don't do something like this to honor somebody who is still alive. And they learned that in Russia. They started naming streets after Donald Trump, and then he did things that they really didn't like, so they had to change the names back again. So usually you want to wait until somebody has died before you start naming things after them, number one. Number two, we have statues of presidents and military leaders and historical figures all over the place. Why is it that nobody has ever called that an idol? Well, I think it's because we don't cover them in gold. Now, that's something that's very different. You typically cover idols in gold, always, whether you're talking about the golden calf or whether you're talking about the idols that Isaiah talks about in the Old Testament. He says you build this thing and you do it out of wood or something else, and then you cover it with fine gold because gold is a precious metal. You do that to something that is very precious. It becomes an idol to you. And I think that's the key thing as well. Donald Trump wants this covered in gold. That's the real deal. That's a real idol when you cover it in gold. And when you don't wait for the person to die, but you put it out while they're still alive. And then when you do it for yourself, now you're in the kind of territory of Roman emperors, of Babylonian kings, and all the rest of it. When you start building images to yourself, and then you do them in gold, and the next thing you know, you're demanding that people bow down and worship it. So Mark Burns says this was not idol worship, it was patriotism. No, it was idol worship. This is like, and every time I see one of these MAGA people say, I'm not worshiping him, it's like, and I think the movie was Working Girls or something, and this guy's caught in bed with another woman by his wife or girlfriend or whatever it was, and he says, it's not what it looks like. That's what these people are doing with this idol worship with Donald Trump. It's not what it looks like. I'm in bed with this thing and I'm worshiping it, but it's not what it looks like. Well, the MAGA religious leaders are blessing a 22-foot golden Trump statue that is at his golf course. And he calls it the real deal because then he puts dash all uppercase gold. And that is the key tip, I think. So again, this pastor is actually a candidate for Congress in South Carolina's 3rd District. And there was a circle of evangelical and Jewish clergy at the foot of the statue, consecrating it. Now, folks, this is not crypto when they're doing this. This is not the crypto bros. There's something else that's going on here. And as many people point out, we now have Jews building a golden idol and getting the evangelical Christians to worship it. So again, this is the moment that America's got to decide about, right? Once every man and nation comes a moment to decide, well, we are certainly at that position, especially for Christians, not just America, but for Christians. Idols are not toppled by argument. The collapse always begins with the people whose silence has been their foundation, who then finally choose to walk away. That's the decision now in front of every Christian who watched a pastor lift his hand at Doral. You should walk away from those churches because they're not churches. The church does not exist to provide moral cover for politicians, right? And let's understand, Mark Burns is a politician more than he is a pastor. And the same thing is true of Robert Jeffress, who has this massive mega church in Dallas, First Baptist Church in Dallas. He supported the president since 2016, and he was on shows over the weekend, Robert Jeffress was, running cover for this, saying it's not idolatry. Since 2016, he served as an evangelical advisory board and has and even delivered a sermon to Trump on the morning of his inauguration during his first term. Well, I would say, Robert, you need to step it up. Obviously, your points haven't come through if you're making the right points, right? How in the world could you not have a problem with Jeffrey Epstein? Robert Jeffress does not have a problem with Trump and Epstein. He doesn't have a problem with all the rest of the stuff that has come out, and he doesn't have a problem with it being covered up. He also didn't have a problem with the genetic code injections, the massive Kool-Aid poisoning of people. As a matter of fact, he was part of the gaslighting. He worked together with Curtis Chang. They got federal money during the Trump administration to use pastors to lie to their sheep and to tell them that taking the poison was loving their neighbor. That is the most cynical perversion of what Christ came to do that I have seen anywhere. This guy disgusts me beyond belief. Robert Jeffress. If you're in Dallas, stay away from this guy. It's absolutely amazing. He revealed on Friday that he was in the Oval Office with Trump and other faith leaders just 3 days after the war began with Iran on February the 28th. And he was telling the president, you have the right to attack whoever you feel. He has absolutely no understanding or support of the idea of a just war that Christians have followed for thousands of years. I mean, this goes back to the time of Augustine, like around 300 AD. And so for nearly 2,000 years, Christians have understood you don't invade other countries as a Christian leader. You don't start wars. You don't attack civilians. Whenever you have a war, the purpose is to stop the war because you are not the aggressor. And he doesn't understand that. As a matter of fact, listen to what he has to say. He says, I wanted to clarify that I believe that the Bible, especially Romans 13, does give Trump moral authority to use whatever force necessary, including assassination or even war, to topple an evil dictator like Kim Jong-un. He said that in 2017. So I'm sure he was telling him that as well with Iran. Let me just say, you go back and these guys all have this false interpretation of Romans 13. I have interviewed Chuck Baldwin a couple of times. The first time I interviewed him was a book that he and his son wrote about this misinterpretation of Romans 13, right? It is absolutely inconsistent with what Robert Jeffress is saying, the actual text. As a matter of fact, it talks about how government is God's instrument of good to protect people and so forth. And if you substitute for government, you substitute, let's say, Adolf Hitler, right? So that people get the issue, you know. Adolf Hitler is God's instrument for good to do. You know, so you follow Adolf Hitler and do whatever Adolf Hitler said. No, that is inconsistent. As a matter of fact, it's not doing what these guys want to say. Romans 13, they want to say, is giving a carte blanche to government to do whatever evil they want to do. Well, God is not the author of evil. And it is completely inconsistent, if you look at Romans 13, to say what that is about. God may put somebody that's evil in power and as a judgment against people, but it does not authorize their evil acts. As a matter of fact, when God has used nations or leaders for evil, he has held them responsible for that evil. And he will hold you responsible as well if you join along with it. And so that's what Americans need to understand. These people who are talking about Romans 13 are just twisting it beyond belief. And they will tell you, yeah, anything the government tells you. It's like Todd Friel. So the government tells you to put a pinwheel on your head. You put a pinwheel on your head. Well, putting a pinwheel on your head or not putting a pinwheel on your head is not evil. If the government tells you to commit suicide with an experimental drug, if the government tells you to bomb civilians, if the government tells you to start a war, you have the obligation to resist that, not to go along with that. Romans 13 does not give them that kind of authority. And so the role of government is to protect citizens from evildoers, he said. But that's so we do evil so that good may come. You know, that's what Paul was also saying in Romans. He'd already said that. He said, well, God forbid that we take that approach. We're going to do evil so that good may come? No, never. If you have a government, I think it is a sign of its legitimacy as to what it does. And again, our government is the Constitution. Our king is the law. So, Jeffress, you need to follow that. And you need to look at Trump and any other official who swears to uphold the Constitution. You need to look at them as subordinate to that king. Lex Rex, the law is king. And if they go their own way, and if they do what is objectively evil, they must be resisted, not encouraged, and not baptized with some fake interpretation of Romans. He went on to say, the Pope is a good man, he's sincere in his faith, but he is sincerely wrong when it comes to Iran, said Robert Jeffress. That's the only discrimination. It used to be that there were points of doctrine that a Southern Baptist preacher would have that would disagree with what the Pope is saying. But no, he's going to be fine with the Pope as long as he doesn't oppose the war that Trump wants. That's the only thing that Robert Jeffress is concerned about. That and vaccinating people. He said the role of the church is to point people to faith in Jesus Christ, right? Well, that's what he said. Except where is he doing that? He's pointing people to vaccines. He's pointing people to Zionist wars. He's doing everything but pointing them to the good news of Christ, the news of love and forgiveness and peace. He's not doing any of that. As a matter of fact, he is worshiping his pedophile, quote unquote, disciple, right? I got to say that if Trump is your disciple and you're teaching him as a Christian leader, I've got to say that's the greatest indictment of your Christian leadership you could ever possibly have. That alone should discredit his ministry, if it is a ministry. He is a stench to Christianity. He is a reproach to the name of Christ. Robert Jeffress, Mark Burns are nothing but political grifters. It's disgusting to see. He's got a church that he says has about 16,000 members, but only about 3,000 of them show up on Sundays. They're kind of like, their disciples, kind of like Trump. They are in name only, I guess. So that happens to a lot of mega churches, but he says he's got 16,000 members, but 3,000 show up. I'm sorry for those 3,000. Anyway, he says, Pope Leo apparently doesn't have a biblical understanding of what the government's role is in protecting its citizens from those who would do us harm, both within and without our country. Well, neither does Jeffress, right? The government's job, this is what the Pope doesn't get. The Pope doesn't get that the government has a right to protect its citizens in a war if it's defensive. Robert Jeffress doesn't draw the line between offense and defense, between aggression and defending people's lives. He thinks it's fine for the government to initiate and to start wars. Many critics argue that the president has little knowledge of Christian scripture. This is coming from Yahoo News. Listen to what they say. This is how, he indicts the Pope because he says the Pope doesn't understand defensive war, but of course Robert Jeffress doesn't understand what an offensive war is. But Yahoo says, in early 2016, during a speech to students at Liberty University, he incorrectly referred to a passage from 2 Corinthians as 2 Corinthians. Whoa, there we go. What an apostate. I said when that happened, I said, well, look, that is nothing other than a shibboleth, right? Shibboleth was something that actually came out of the Bible. It had people as one area of one tribe of Israel that had difficulty pronouncing something, and so they used that as a shibboleth. They made them pronounce a particular word. You can get regional dialects and that type of thing. So they could tell that somebody was or was not a part of this group by the way, whether or not they could pronounce the word shibboleth. Maybe they had lisps or something, right? But again, that's the big issue. Not Epstein, not wars, not death by injection, not wars of aggression, not pandemic fraud and all the rest of the stuff. No, that's the big issue. And then they get that, and then this is their second evidence of the fact that the president doesn't have any knowledge of Christian scripture. First of all, he said 2 Corinthians instead of 2 Corinthians. Well, the interesting thing is that's what they say in the UK. It's an American thing. It's an American shibboleth to say 2 Corinthians. But then they go on, they say, and in a photo op, he appeared to hold a Bible upside down. Whoa. That's it. That's where they come after Trump from Bloomberg. Those are their criticisms of him. It has nothing to do with any morality whatsoever. But I thought this was a great satire that was written by Peter Guymus, is his account on Twitter. I don't know who this guy is, but I thought his satire was really well written. He does it from the point of view and in the voice of Pastor Mark Burns. And when I saw this, at first I saw this, I'm a founding member of the President's Evangelical Advisory Board, a member of the Pastors for Trump, and the informal spiritual advisor to the most powerful man on earth. Well, that's not who Peter Guymus says he is in his bio. But people look at this, and the next paragraph is, I need you to understand the 22-foot golden statue we unveiled at Trump National Doral on Wednesday is not a golden calf. Well, at that point, he got ratioed. Everybody's saying, what's that? You're disgusting and all the rest of the stuff. No, he's not the pastor. He's talking in the voice of Mark Burns. And yet people just read those first 2 sentences and they went on attack. This is what people are thinking about Trump, as a matter of fact. But anyway, he said, I said it at the podium, I said it at social media, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me. And he's doing this in the voice of Mark Burns. I'm very good at saying things until people believe me. I told CNN I had a Bachelor of Science degree. I did not. I told them I was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. I was not. I told them my congregation was 300 strong. It's closer to 12. I said all these things with the same conviction that I now bring to this podium, at the base of a 22-foot golden image of a living president. When I tell you, this is not a golden calf. This is a celebration of life. By the way, when you look at his, I did look that up, and it turned out that Mark Burns did not get a Bachelor of Science degree. He attended for 1 semester and dropped out. So yeah, it looks like he's got a lot of false claims. As a matter of fact, so many false claims on his website that he claimed that his website was hacked and people had put false claims on there to make him look good. That happens all the time, right?
It's kind of like the, no, I didn't say I was Jewish. I said I was Jew-ish. It's,
Yeah,
no,
that guy.
I didn't say I had a Bachelor of Science. I said I had a BS degree.
Yeah, it's a lot of BS. And it's a very high degree of BS, as a matter of fact. Whenever anybody would attack him, he would say, oh, they're just attacking me because I'm a black Christian and I'm a supporter of Trump. And they don't like that. Anyway, so he points out, this is Peter Guymus, and he's writing in the voice of Mark Burns. He said, we draped the statue in white and blue fabric like a Greek toga, which someone pointed out is a pagan tradition. But I said, hey, that's Western civilization. That's close enough. They do it in Greece. So anyway, he says, we did it the Butler pose because that was the moment that the bullet missed by 1/4 of an inch, and I decided that that was God. Well, if that had happened, it would have been God, but that didn't happen at all. Yeah, he didn't get hit in the ear by a bullet. As a matter of fact, he goes on to say, the sculptor Alan Cottrill has molded the likeness of 16 presidents. And just to expand on that a little bit, this sculptor has done 16 presidential statues. He's done statues of people like Washington, Jefferson. He's done Reagan. He's done Lincoln. All of those statues were done in bronze. His only statue that he overlaid in gold was for Donald Trump. And it cost $60,000 more to cover it in gold leaf. Bronze is good enough to honor somebody. But if you really want to worship them, you got to cover it in gold. Again, this is the next level. As Trump said, it is the real thing. It is beyond honoring somebody. This is really worship, folks. As a matter of fact, this is what the thing looks like. It truly is amazing. And there's Trump saying it's the real deal. Gold at this golf course, the Doral Golf Course in Miami. So again, funding came from a collective of crypto investors promoting their meme coin, Dollar Patriot, and they wanted visibility for their coin. I want you to understand the funding mechanism here. A speculative digital currency designed to transfer money from late buyers to early buyers, paid for a golden idol of a president, erected on that president's own property, dedicated by that president's own pastor, while the coin pumps in real time as photos circulate. The money changers didn't just get back in the temple, they built the temple. They are the temple. And I, Mark Burns, blessed it. I blessed it because that's what I do. I bless things. I'm very good at it. No one has ever checked my credentials for blessings because I radiate certainty, and certainty is the only credential this movement has ever required. Certainty. He said, I held my cell phone up to the microphone. The president's voice came out from the speaker at the base of the statue, his voice emanating from the golden image, speaking to the assembled worshipers, blessing them, thanking them. The faithful heard the voice and they wept. They lifted their hands. Some of them fell to their knees. The voice said, I want to thank Mark Burns, the pastor, blah, blah, blah. You heard all of that. The image spoke and the people worshiped. Now he says, now I need you to open your Bible to Revelation 13. And he had power to give life to the image of the beast, that it should both speak and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he says, now close your Bible. That's a completely different situation. That's about compulsion. Nobody was compelled today. People wept voluntarily. People knelt voluntarily. The beast forces worship. We just made worship so easy and so gold and so loud that choosing otherwise never occurred to anyone. He said the theologian from Fuller Seminary sent a letter afterwards. 9 pages, he referred to Exodus 32, Revelation 13, Daniel 3, the golden calf, the image that speaks, Nebuchadnezzar's statue, gold in a field with a ceremony, and everybody commanded to fall down when they heard the voice. I said, brother, Nebuchadnezzar's statue didn't have a meme coin. It's a completely different context, he said. Now I want to tell you about Dorothy. And again, this is in the voice of Mark Burns. She is 74. She's been in my congregation since before I was on CNN, before Trump, before any of this. Her husband, Ray, died in 2023, colon cancer. She has his wedding ring on a chain around her neck. She had it. After the ceremony, Dorothy came up to the statue. She took the chain off her neck and she placed Ray's ring at the base, on the pedestal, like an offering. She said, Ray would have wanted to be here. This is as close as I can get to him. Well, again, in the voice of Mark Burns, I watched a 74-year-old widow leave her dead husband's wedding ring at the feet of a golden statue of a president who would not know her name if she died in front of him. And I felt the Spirit move. I felt warmth. I felt confirmation because that's what I'm built to feel. I am a machine that converts surrender into confirmation. That is my function in this system. And so he says, Dorothy gave her sacred object to a golden image, and I said, amen. Now, she can't get it back. I checked. Maintenance collected everything from the base that night, liability reasons. It's in a bin somewhere at Trump National Doral. Ray's ring in a bin at a golf course beneath a golden statue funded by cryptocurrency speculation. I will not tell Dorothy this. I will tell her God received it. Nobody is coming down any mountain about idolatry, right? Moses isn't coming down the mountain. Jesus isn't coming in with a whip to scourge the money changers. No, there's no stone tablets. There's no whip. There's only us in the clearing of palm trees with a golden image that speaks and a congregation that kneels and a meme coin that pumps and a widow's ring and a bin and a pastor at the podium whose credentials are fabricated and whose certainty is absolute. 2,000 years we worship God who was born in a barn, who was homeless, who was a refugee, who sold everything, who washed feet, who touched lepers, who said, "Blessed are the poor, the meek, the merciful, the peacemakers," who said, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me." We worship someone who overturned the tables and drove out the sellers with a whip, who forgave his executioners from the cross. But we built a 22-foot golden image of a man who lives in a tower with his name in gold letters, who has never been poor, who has never been meek, who has never made peace, who has never served anyone, who has never washed anyone's feet, who has never forgiven anyone, who has raw-dogged a porn star 4 months after his third wife gave birth, paid $130,000 in hush money, and we said, "That's fine." That's what his spiritual leaders say to him. And you know, when you think about that, we could also throw in this reminder of Trump and what he did to a 74-year-old stroke victim to kick her out of her home when she didn't want to leave so he could expand his parking lot at the casino. She didn't want to take his offer. She was not for sale at any price. It's kind of like the movie Up. As a matter of fact, I did a report on that when Trump was running in the primaries. Really got Alex angry. But anyway, he basically succeeds. He gets the government to come on his side and throw her off of her property, do eminent domain. And again, he doesn't respect private property doing that. And after he got her thrown off and tore down her property, her house, he declared bankruptcy and just closed the casino. Yeah, that's the guy they're worshiping. We put all this at his golf course on his own land, paid for by pump and dump, dedicated by a pastor with a fake degree, blessed by the man himself, speaking through a phone at the base of his own image while widows knelt and wept and left their dead husbands' rings at his feet. And I, Mark Burns, stood at the podium and said, "This is not a golden calf. We worship the Lord Jesus Christ and him alone." Then I, Mark Burns, turned around, faced 22 feet of gold, and felt nothing. No conviction, no shame, no still small voice, just warmth, just certainty, just the absolute peace of a man who's been lying for so long he can no longer locate the difference between faith and performance. The Israelites at least had the decency to be ashamed when Moses came down, but we will never be ashamed. We have too much invested. The statue cost $360,000. The meme coin is pumping. The ring is in the bin. Revenue is up 340%. We could add that the Dow is at 50,000, like Pam Bondi said. And if it were sin, the money would stop. And the money hasn't stopped. Therefore, it is not sin. This is the Paula White theology. That's all of it. Because Moses never had a meme coin. Well, the bottom line, as everybody is pointing out, this is what MAGA does. You know, it's the golden calf, yet again, that we see. And I like this meme somebody put up. It's the Trump golden statue in the back, and there's this guy who's got a gold coat on, and he says, well, it's not blasphemy. Jesus is honoring God's anointed vessel, Trump. He's chosen to save this nation, just like you. We're both persecuted by the elite, but we're building God's kingdom through wealth, power, and faith. And he's saying this to Jesus. And Jesus says, so it's blasphemy. Oh, that was a perfect response to all this. But when we look at this, let's understand that it's not just the crypto guys, right? This is a bunch of evangelical pastors. I don't know what good news they're telling people. Is that you can get rich if you give money to pastors like Paula White? What is their good news? We know what the good news from Christ was. It was about your relationship with God, how all of us stand condemned before God, but Christ paid the price for that, and there's forgiveness for everybody. You can always start again, and he paid it all, and you can't pay it, and you can't earn his favor, but you can accept it. That's the good news. But Paula White's going to go around and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pray to heal anybody out here unless you pony up some more money before we do this. Well, there was a...
did you want to get the comments before we end? We're
almost
out of time.
I'm not ending yet. Oh, we're almost out of time. Well, I want to show you this. This is that's Mark Burns in the middle, and he's flanked by a couple of guys that are there. One of them is Yakov Flitchkin, and we'll go a little bit long, Lance, okay? He is a Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Jewish activist, philanthropist, and executive director of an Alliance for Global Cooperation, an organization focused on international peace, security, diplomacy, and interfaith efforts. He's associated with this Golden Trump statue. This is the thing I find interesting, how they have pushed this crypto, and yet what do we see here? We see a grifting, quote-unquote, pastor who's running for Congress, and we see two Zionists on either side of him. Pastor Mark Burns led this. He publicly thanked Flitchkin, as well as Hershey Friedman. That's the other guy there. Flitchkin and Friedman attended the ribbon-cutting dedication as part of a group of Hasidic activists, all joining with evangelical supporters. And by the way, they're all Zionist idolaters. They make an idol out of secular states, whether it is Israel or whether it's the Trump administration. It is political idolatry that they're really into. Flitchkin is based in Monsey, New York, and he's all about humanitarian and advocacy work, including aid for Ukrainian Jewish refugees, interfaith diplomacy, and involvement in pro-Trump or Trump-related initiatives like the Trump Peace Park opening in Ukraine and attending Trump's 2025 inauguration event. So he's one of these inside guys. And what about the other guy, Hershey Friedman? Well, he is a big-time billionaire, and he's from Canada. So you got people who are not necessarily even American citizens, right? As a matter of fact, Hershey makes sure that whether he's a Canadian or an American, he makes sure that he is in Israel at least once a month. He made a fortune in plastics. Yeah, there you go. That's the graduate right there, right? I guess he took, I got one word for you, plastics. Well, he made a fortune in plastics and also in kosher meat in North America, as well as luxury real estate development. And he is a big supporter of Talmudic books in Israel that he funds there. By 1982, he acquired a plastics packaging business. By 2014, he told the Jerusalem Post, "We are the largest in North America. We package Hershey's chocolates, Pepsi, Nestle, El Candy, the famous Entenmann donuts, as well as larger and smaller companies internationally and locally. We're also probably the largest bread bag producer." He is also co-owner of Dun & Bradstreet. He has got some serious money. He is a billionaire. And so there's a lot of private donors like this who are basically the same type of people that are going to be behind Trump's ballroom. You spell that B-A-A-L. He is a philanthropist who supports and contributes to charities, hospitals, and yeshivas, and golden idols, I guess, as well. He's the chief patron of the Babylon Talmud, of the Jerusalem Talmud, and several other Jewish books that are religious books. These editions are called the Friedman Edition because he has paid for them. The cost of the Babylonian Talmud project alone was over $20 million. And then he has a kosher meat business. He resides in Montreal, but he spends 1 week every month in Israel. And yet he is here in America to build golden idols to Donald Trump. Does that tell you everything about this president? I think it tells you everything that you need to know. That's for sure. And when you look at the people that are behind him, we are compelled, folks, to tell people that the fake version of Christianity that's sold to people sold to the public by people like Mark Burns and people like Robert Jeffress is a politicized version of this. We have the left is very concerned about Trump. They say, well, he's out there pushing for the separation of, saying that the wall of separation should not be there. I think it should be there. But we need to understand that what Jefferson said was it was a wall around the government. We want to wall the government away from church. And I want to keep people like this out of any church that I'm involved with. I want to keep Trump out. I don't want the government wants to take over everything. That's just the way that it is. It wants to consolidate control over every single thing. And the church institutions are nothing different about that. And institutions are easily co-opted. That's why we need to understand the church is not an institution. The church is people. And those people need to not treat themselves as or view themselves as an institution. It's a very, very different thing. But let's get some of these comments before we leave here. DG8, thank you for the tip, says, David, this is pathetic, praying over and to a statue of a man. I'm just waiting for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to show up. How can any Christian excuse this? Yeah, they were thrown in the fire because they wouldn't do what Mark Burns did. And I tell you, if you, this guy who pushed back against Mark Burns, he got metaphorically thrown into the fire on Twitter. The people, by everybody, pretty much. Some people got the satire, and they agreed with it. Some people got the satire and attacked him, and some people didn't see the satire and would have agreed with him if they'd understood it. But they attacked him nevertheless. He also says, David, why are Christians praying with Jews anyway? If it ain't about the blood of Jesus, it is meaningless. That's right. This is an abomination to God. Blasphemy in the highest order. We are begging for judgment. Yeah, never forget, he says, Jeffress compared the blood shed on the cross by Jesus to the aborted fetal cells in the COVID vaccine. That's right. That's what he and Curtis Chang were doing. You know, they were literally trying to make it kind of a rite of sacrifice like the abortionists do. Audi, Modern Retro Radio, says Trump's cult is still saying that Trump is being misled, as if Trump truly believed that Iran was a week away from having a nuclear weapon. Yeah, or as if he believed that he has a peace deal going, or he's going to be able to escort people through the Strait of Hormuz. It's all a lie, as Audi says. It's all a lie. And he says, damn it, that's the name of his podcast. And that really is true when you're talking about this particular administration and this particular time. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
You're listening to The David Knight Show. You're listening to The David Knight Show.